Well, for more insight into the topic, I spoke to Mark Greiz. He's an international marketing consultant and owner of Mark Greiz Consulting. I started by asking him about the emergence of fashion buyers in China.
The China market operates very differently than the U.S. market. And if we talk about fashion buying from the traditional sense, it really is a relatively new concept that's been, that really came about starting about 5 to 7 years ago, which is primarily based from multi-brand fashion boutiques buying and sourcing and curating international brands. So it still is a relatively new process. There is a learning curve going on, but I do feel going forward over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see much more of those activities happening in the China market.
So who are these consumers? What are some of the demographics of some of these clients who are turning to fashion buyers?
Well, when we talk about the actual consumers, when we talk about the fashion buyers are working primarily for smaller to larger multi-brand boutiques, which carry a wide range of international as well as Chinese brands. They don't work for the large department stores as they do in the United States. So in terms of the actual consumer who's actually purchasing from these boutiques, I would say they're just more fashion-savvy consumer in China, located in various cities from Shanghai to smaller Tier 2 cities such as Chengdu and Harbin and Tianjin.
Now, China's growing middle class is obviously wielding a lot more spending power. So what sort of brands are they tending to gravitate towards?
Well, that's a really good question. And honestly, I mean, we have to look at sort of a historical trend. If we go back to about previous 10 years, before there was a proliferation of multi-brand boutiques in the market, most of the consumers in China were really gravitating towards sort of well-known global high fashion brands that we're all aware of from the United States and from Europe primarily. But right now the market really is changing, and it's really quite dynamic. So instead of really gravitating as much towards the sort of global iconic brands that we're all aware of, they're actually starting to gravitate more towards niche brands.
Now, you mentioned some of these niche brands. How big is the market for those in China?
Actually, it's extremely, it's sizable and it's growing. I would say right now, the primary market in China still is for more of the national and global and iconic brands that we're talking about, whether they're luxury brands or whether they're fast fashion brands like Zara as well. So I would say the majority of the market still is focused on these major brands. But one of the fastest growing segments within the market is towards those niche brands. So in terms of market size, I can't give you a percentage of what percentage niche brands comprise the total market, but it still is a minority percentage, but that percentage is growing year after year.
So you have these multi-brand stores. You also have, obviously, these very established brands. So what are they doing in terms of trying to compete with each other for all these Chinese consumers?
Yeah, that's also a very good question. I mean, the Chinese market is actually a very complex market, and China is unique in the sense that it's the largest, population of any country in the world, and also in terms of the actual size of the apparel market, it's the second largest after the United States, and it definitely will eclipse the size of the U.S. market probably within another couple of years or so. So competing to these particular consumers is actually very complex because the GDP per capita, the actual average earning of Chinese consumers, is still relatively low. That's why digital strategy is actually a very important component over this. A lot of niche brands, they tend to enter the Chinese market primarily through showrooms or some of the actual showroom shows which take place around Shanghai Fashion Week a couple times a year. That's only a small part of the story. They're actually marketing their brands to agents such as showrooms, but other niche brands fail to market themselves directly to the consumers and build their brand awareness in the Chinese market. And you do that through a very strong digital strategy in the market. And the complexity is that the social media landscape in China and in the West is actually quite different. The platforms which are used are different, and the means of engaging the customers are a little bit different as well. And also the means of the way Chinese consumers are actually using social media to interact with their brands is a little bit different than the West, particularly in the United States and Europe as well. So I would say if you really want to build awareness in the market, if you really do want to capture more of that market share, not only should you look towards a good wholesale partner, such as a showroom or an agent, but you really do need to take control of your marketing strategy, which includes a combination of print as well as different forms of publicity and public relations in the market as well. And if you do that, I think you could have a very good chance of being successful in the market, because I know a lot of the brands, I think, when we talk about American and European brands, I think they fall short on their digital strategy and actually the consumer-oriented marketing program.